For most of history, we had this image of the lone hero. But think about it. Today, almost everything that matters gets built by a team. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into the incredible 100-year scientific journey that cracked the code on how we actually work together. I mean, we've all been there, right? You're on a team that just clicks. Everything flows. And then you're on a team that's just a total slog. It's a feeling we all know, but what's really behind it? What does the science actually have to say about why some teams fly and others just fall apart? Well, the answer didn't just appear in some aha moment. Nope. It was pieced together over 100 years, like a real-life detective story, full of dead ends and shocking twists. So let's follow the clues. Okay, so our story starts somewhere you probably wouldn't expect, with a complete and total focus on the individual. Seriously, for the first half of the 20th century, the whole idea of a team as something you could scientifically study, it just wasn't a thing. The whole field of applied psychology was built on this one idea called differential psychology. And the core belief was super simple. If you want to make work better, you got to figure out what makes each person tick. The group? That was just background noise. And this idea wasn't just academic. It shaped the entire world of work. Everything, and I mean everything, was designed around the individual. You were hired alone, trained alone, evaluated alone, and paid for what you did alone. If you had to depend on someone else, that was seen as a bug in the system, something that needed to be fixed. And if you want to see just how intense this focus was, get this. For 32 years, the top scientific journal in the field, the Journal of Applied Psychology, published a grand total of zero articles on work teams. It was a complete scientific blind spot. Okay, so after World War II, you start to see a little shift. But I mean, slowly. Researchers finally started asking about groups, but here's the kicker. A lot of them were only doing it to prove that individuals were still better. The group was kind of like the villain in their story. This created this huge scientific showdown, really. On one side, you had the individualist camp. They thought the group was just context, like the weather affecting a hiker. The hiker is what matters, not the rain. But the groupie camp, they were like, no, you're missing the point. They said the group is the whole ecosystem. You can't understand the forest by just studying one tree. And for a while, it really looked like the skeptics were right. The early studies kept uncovering all these problems that are now famous, right? Social loafing, groupthink, conformity, all this stuff. It honestly looked like putting people together just made things worse. It kind of cemented this idea that groups were where good ideas went to die. But then, the 1990s hit, and everything changed. The world of work was getting way more complicated, competition was global, and all of a sudden, figuring out teamwork wasn't just some fun academic puzzle anymore. It was a matter of survival. And just to really let that sink in, remember, for most of the 20th century, studying teams was this tiny, ignored field, a quiet little scientific backwater. And then this happened. Just look at that chart for a second. That curve. The research on teams didn't just grow a little bit. It absolutely exploded. That quiet little backwater, it turned into a raging river. So with this massive explosion of research, scientists needed a way to organize it all. They needed a map, and they found one in this beautifully simple idea, the Input Process Output Model, or IPO. It's really straightforward. You have your inputs, that's your people, your resources, your task. They go through a process, how they talk, how they coordinate, and that creates the outputs, performance, results, whether people are happy or not. So this IPO model basically gave researchers three big buckets to look into. First, the task and structure, like what's the actual work and how is the team set up. Second, composition, who's on the team, what are their skills, their personalities. And third, processes and states. This is the juicy stuff. How do they actually interact, and what's the collective vibe that emerges from that? But you know how it is. Simple models are great, but reality is messy. Scientists pretty quickly figured out that real teamwork isn't a neat little assembly line. It's not A, then B, then C. It's chaotic, it's dynamic, and it's way, way messier than the IPO model suggested. Yeah, this quote from the research just hits the nail on the head. They said the IPO model was becoming a limiting factor. It was just too rigid, too static. It couldn't capture all the crazy feedback loops and the way teams change and evolve over time. So this is more like what we think of today. It's not a straight line at all. It's a living, breathing, dynamic system. Like, check out how an outside leader that's part of the structure can actually change the skills of the people on the team. And those new skills then change how the team makes decisions. See? Everything is connected to everything else in this constant cycle. So where does all this leave us? Well, this new, more complex way of seeing teams has blown the doors wide open on what the future of working together could look like. And one of the biggest ideas for that future is something called teaming. As the researcher Amy Edmondson puts it, it's basically teamwork on the fly. The whole idea is that we're moving away from the old school stable team with the same people for years. Instead, we're seeing these fluid groups that come together for a project and then, poof, disband just as fast.
And you better believe the science is racing to keep up with this new reality. Scientists are now looking at multi-team systems. Basically, how do you get teams of teams to work together on these huge, massive projects? They're studying what happens when people are constantly joining and leaving a team. And get this, they're using amazing new tech, like AI and wearable sensors, to actually measure team dynamics in real time, stuff we couldn't even imagine just a few years ago.
Which leaves us with one last really interesting question to chew on. After this whole 100-year journey to finally crack the code of the team, is work itself already changing so fast that we're moving past it? Are we heading into a new age where the most important skill isn't being on a team, but the constant fluid act of teaming?